huge Greatsword nerfs, a small Blaster's rework, and Chakram's first set of changes since it released. These, among a whole lot more, are what we can find in this patch of Brawlhalla. And today, I'll be your guide to break down all the weird complex lingo, clear up any misconceptions, and give you some insight into how these will affect actual gameplay going forward. First up is a change to Blasters. Brawlhalla says, the Blaster's Neutralite now has greater stun and leaves the opponent in a closer location for greatly improved follow-up attacks. The Blaster's Sidelight also now has greater stun to provide combo opportunities. So what's actually happening here? Blaster's Neutralite has increased stun from 20 to 21 and decreased force from 52 fixed 0 variable to 42 fixed 0 variable. So what does that mean? Basically, Neutralite is gonna stun them for 1 frame longer, so that something like Neutralite into Nair is a little bit faster, and it's also gonna hit them slightly lower, which I think will probably make it easier to hit things like side air or recovery. But those are not gonna be a true combo. You'll only be able to do that if your opponent doesn't have a dodge, and they still might be able to jump out. The Sidelight change is quite different. This is increasing stun from 22 to a range of 24 to 18 while decreasing the damage from 15 to 10. This is pretty significant. This is what I was talking about with that slight rework. So 5 less damage on a setup attack is really a big deal. And that tells you that they're not just changing the move, they're not just nerfing the move, they're adjusting how it works entirely. So this increased stun from 22 to a range of 24 to 18 basically means that when you land Sidelight, it's gonna stun for 2 frames longer and potentially give you a true combo into side air. But that's only the case if you land it right away. If you use the Sidelight and the opponent gets hit later into the move, it's actually gonna have less stun than before. So this is rewarding accuracy, it's rewarding good timing, and it's changing the move from purely a setup tool to a potential actual combo tool. If you're a Blasters player, this is clearly a huge deal because the way that Sidelight works, this is an integral part of your kit, is potentially going to entirely shift. All of these situations where you hit a Sidelight and then you know you have to read a dodge, there may be some now where you can potentially get a follow-up that is guaranteed. At the same time though, if you're not getting those, if you're not getting your reads, the damage is going to be significantly nerfed. So overall, this is a buff to Blasters, potentially a huge buff to Blasters that is pushing the skill ceiling a little bit higher, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm just gonna say it got buffed, and how big that buff is will depend on how it plays out. Chakram. Okay, Brawlhalla says, we have greatly decreased the amount of allowed acceleration and movement during the Chakram aerial attacks to grant clearer opportunities to chase down and punish these attacks. The fused Chakram Sidelight and Side Air have received greater force to bring the reward for the fused mode closer in line with other weapons. The split Chakram Neutralite now has less stun and provides a consistent frame advantage to guarantee dodge windows for certain follow-up attacks, but also has slightly less recover time on hit to provide a smoother feel in use. This is a lot of words. Let me just finish this paragraph before I break it down. Similarly, the split Chakram Neutral Air now has less stun and provides a consistent frame advantage to guarantee dodge windows, and also impulses the user during the first hit to provide more consistent locations on hit. We have also decreased the stun of the split Chakram Down Air to provide dodge windows between follow-up attacks. The split Chakram Recovery now has less force to better match this kit's string potential. As you can tell, a lot is changing here, so let me break it down one by one. Chakram Aerial Attacks. Decrease the amount of allowed acceleration. So what this is saying is basically the movement that you can get when using your moves in the air is being brought down. This is something that I was saying this should probably change before the weapon even came out, so I'm glad to see it. They don't give specific numbers. I think it's probably hard to give specific numbers for this. I would like a percentage maybe in the patch notes. We'll see how noticeable this actually is. Chakram Fused Sidelight. Increase the force from 70 fixed 30 variable to 70 fixed 35 variable. Okay, so these are terms that popped up in Blasters, but I figured it's probably better to explain it now. The way that force on attacks works in Brawlhalla, force is just how far you're getting sent, is you have a fixed value, which is how far you always get sent. So think about in white HP versus red HP, fixed, you're getting hit the same distance. So that Blasters move where it had 0 variable force, it was only fixed fixed force, that means no matter your HP, it's always sending the same distance. Variable force, if you can't tell by the name, changes. So the more damaged you are, the further it's gonna send, and the higher that number, the stronger it is. So this is not changing the fixed force at all. White HP, they're getting sent the exact same distance, but it's increasing the variable force by 5. To give you some context, because 5, like, what does that actually mean? Later in this patch, they describe an increase of 4 as significantly buffing the force. So keep that number in the back of your mind for this entire video. Brawlhalla themselves see a change of 4 as significant, a significant buff, a significant nerf. And I would agree with that. The rest of this video is going to deal with force changes a lot. The most important thing for you to know is changes to variable force are changes to how early or late this move will knock out. If the force is increased, it's going to knock out earlier. If the force is decreased, it's going to knock out later. So Chakram's fused sidelight is getting a significant buff to how far it sends. And honestly, I think it could probably use it. Next up, we've got the fused side air, which is increasing the force from 58 fixed, 40 variable to 60 fixed, 43 variable. So this is also a buff, and now that we understand these numbers a little bit better, we can understand how big of a buff it is. So it's an increase in fixed force by 2, which means it's always going to send a little bit further, and then an increase in variable force by 3, which means it's not quite a significant buff, but it is a sizable one. Now we've got a nerf. So the fused down air has a decreased force from 60 fixed, 40 variable to 60 fixed, 38 variable. Again, the number of 4 is the marker for significant, so this is a small nerf. Chakram split neutralite. Decrease stun from 22 to a range of 19 to 15. Decrease total recover time on hit from 11 to 9. So this is basically saying that when you split the Chakram and you use neutralite, it's going to have 3 less frames of stun always. But to compensate, you're going to be able to recover after landing it 2 frames faster. So overall, it's a nerf of 1 frame, and it's just changing the timing a little bit. The other thing is that it has a range of 19 to 15 now instead of 22, and I'm assuming that means when you hit with only the second punch of this Chakram Endlight, instead of stunning your opponent for 19 frames and then being able to follow up, it's going to stun them for 15 frames, and the opponent has more time to dodge. You can think of this basically as a nerf of 1 frame, which is significant for those niche cases where you could get a guaranteed combo after the Endlight, but for the most part, it seems to be a change in timing more than anything else. Chakram split neutral air. Decreased stun from 25 to a range of 23 to 19. Impulse applied to the user now occurs on the first hit as well, and also slightly increased the impulse applied to the user. So the first thing, the stun, this is something we've dealt with in almost all of these notes thus far. Stun, how long your opponent is stuck after you hit the move, that's being nerfed by 2 frames. So now a lot of these true combos, nair into recovery, are going to have more of a dodge opportunity. And it has the same change as the previous one, where I'm presuming the second hit, if you only land the second one, it's going to deal less stun, as opposed to having the same amount for the entire move. These impulse changes, I presume, are also going to help with a lot of these drop cases on the neutral air. This is another thing I asked for kind of ad nauseum in my initial Chakram videos. This move dropped like crazy, so hopefully this fixes some of those cases. Chakram split down air. Decreased stun of the final hit of the aerial version from 19 to a range of 17 to 16. Decreased stun of the close grounded version from 25 to a range of 23 to 21. Increased stun of the far grounded version from 18 to a range of 19 to 17. Okay, so basically Chakram down air, when you split it, has different amounts of stun based on where you land the move. If you land it in the air, it's going to be different from if you land it on the ground, which is going to be different from if you land it on the ground when you're really, really close. What this is saying is when you land it in the air, it's going to have 2 to 3 frames of less stun. If you land it on the ground and you're very close, it's going to have 2 to 4 frames of less stun. And if you land it on the ground from far, it's actually going to have 1 more frame of stun as long as you do it early. This is changing the move so that it's less oppressive in the air, and it's slightly better on the ground if your spacing is good. The final change is the Chakram split recovery, which has decreased force from 61 fixed 40 variable to 61 fixed 38 variable. So a small nerf there. Overall, Chakram got some pretty sizable nerfs to its combo game, some nerfs to its neutral game with all that decreased acceleration, and then a couple buffs to its fuse version to make swapping between the two modes more feasible, more viable. I think these changes on paper look pretty great, so we'll see how they play out in practice. That was a long section. Gauntlets is up next, and this one's pretty short, so we get a little bit of breather before the big Greatsword changes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Gauntlets. Brawlhalla says we have increased the time to hit of Gauntlet side air to open a dodge window after downlight, and the Gauntlet's recovery now has greater recovery time on miss to bring the risk of this attack closer in line with its considerable reward and utility. Alright, so Gauntlet side air increased time to hit from 12 to 13. This is meaning it's gonna take 1 frame longer for the move to come out. If you're not a Gauntlets player, you will never notice this because that's 1/60th of a second, but if you're a Gauntlets main, you may notice that change in timing. The biggest thing that this changes, according to Brawlhalla, is that downlight into side air on Gauntlets is no longer a true combo. Gauntlet's recovery was nerfed, so it increased the total recover time on miss from 8 fixed 12 variable to 12 fixed 12 variable. So this sounds a little confusing. Increasing the recovery time sounds like a buff. It's actually not. So recovery time is how long you're stuck after you use a move. It's the lag. And this is adding 4 frames of guaranteed lag. So recovery time has the same logic as force. Fixed means you're always stuck for this amount of time, and variable means it changes based on your dexterity. But this is a nerf to fixed forward, which is almost always worse. And it's 4 frames. That's a pretty big nerf. So overall, Gauntlets, they took a hit this patch. Greatsword is up next. Okay, this is a big one. Brawlhalla says the window for movement inputs like dash, dodge, or jump has been greatly delayed after missing a Greatsword neutralite or sidelight opener to provide a larger window to counterattack against these string starters. The stun of neutralite and sidelight bridge now provide a consistent frame advantage on hit to guarantee dodge windows between certain follow-up attacks. A little bit confusing, let's get into it. Greatsword Neutral Light Opener delayed the dash dodge jump cancel window on miss from 21 to 26. Let's talk about each part. So Greatsword Neutral Light Opener means the neutral light that you use from the ground. The first time you hit the button, that's the opener. The second time is the bridge, and the third time is the finisher. So this is a nerf to the opener. It's a nerf to the move that people will spam in neutral to land that first hit. Next, they say they delayed the dash dodge jump cancel window on miss. So basically, when you use a Greatsword attack on the ground, there is a separate amount of lag for missing the attack and then moving or jumping or dodging compared to when you do another attack right away. So think about when people miss a Greatsword attack and then they do the second one. That is a separate amount of lag between them just being able to jump away. Usually they can jump away and they can dodge away and it's pretty safe. But this is a big nerf. So you know how I said the change of 4 recovery frames was significant for Gauntlets? This is a nerf of 5. So Greatsword users are now stuck for 5 frames longer after they whiff a neutralite. That is a big deal. That's a pretty big nerf. And it's actually the exact same change for Greatsword sidelight. So they say delayed the dash dodge jump cancel window from 19 to 24, and also delayed the walk cancel window from 24 to 29. So again, 5 frames here, both when you miss it and then try to jump away, and when you miss it and try to walk away. These 2 changes are the big ones. You saw in the very beginning of the video that Greatsword had a whole bunch. Of course, I'm going to go over that right after this, but these 2, this is a big deal, and I do not want to understate it. 5 frames to a move that people historically have been just spamming over and over and over again to try to get their initial hits. That's a big deal. And it also goes to show that these moves have been so good for so long. These are the ones that when Greatsword was crazy back in 2020, you hear the lore of how insane Greatsword was on release. It was because you could spam these moves with no lag. So the fact that it's getting nerfed still 5 years later, that tells you a lot. These moves are good. But let's get into the rest. You get the idea. Greatsword Neutral Light Bridge from Sidelight Opener. Change the stun from 15 to a range of 15 to 11. This is when you sidelight and then neutral light after it. What they're changing is the range of stun. So I believe this means when you hit with the sidelight and then you hit with the neutral light, If it's later into the move, you're gonna deal less stun to the opponent and they have more of an opportunity to dodge out. And what I'm guessing this is aimed at is a setup that covers a whole bunch of dodges at the same time. This is a little bit complicated, but the way that fighting games often work is you have an attack that deals a certain amount of stun, and that difference between how fast you get out of it and how long your opponent is stunned for is what allows you to get a combo. Because if you get out quicker and your opponent is still stuck, then you can land your next hit. But over the years, people have figured out if you delay your attack, let's say it stuns for a quarter of a second and you're also left stuck for a quarter of a second. So if you hit this move, you shouldn't be able to get a combo. However, if you only hit with the very end of the move, your opponent's stun that quarter of a second is only going to begin from the moment you land your attack. And because you landed the attack later than you normally would, you're actually free much faster. I think what this is changing is that phenomenon. So people would do a move like Neutralite and then maybe they do a Sidelight afterward, a little bit delayed, and that delay was enough to get a guaranteed combo off the opponent's movement. I don't know if I explained that the best. This is more of a thing in Smash than it is in Brawlhalla to begin with, but I think that's the goal of these changes anyway, making the timing more consistent for the person trying to dodge Greatsword. So all of these changes are actually the same thing. They're not nerfing the stun when you land the attack right away. They're not nerfing the force. It's just changing it so there's a range of stun depending on when you hit the attack. And what that rewards, similar to the Blaster's change, is people landing it right when they hit the move. And it's nerfing people hitting it later into the move. So here, Neutralite Bridge from downlight opening changed the stun from 17 to a range of 17 to 8. So this is when you downlight and then Neutralite. If you hit right as the swing starts, it's the exact same as before. But if you hit only with the very end of the swing, your opponent isn't stuck for as long. Greatsword Sidelight Bridge from Neutralite opener changed the stun from 16 to a range of 16 to 7, same thing. And Greatsword Sidelight Bridge from downlight opener changed the stun from 14 to a range of 14 to 5. Again, same things there. Overall, this is a big nerf to Greatsword, but looking at the list of changes, you might think the weapon is gutted. That's not the case. Greatsword has so many moves that when they decide to change how one thing functions, they have to change how a ton of things function. So in a patch where they're changing only the follow-up attack, for another weapon, it'll be 1 note. For Greatsword, they're changing the bridges, so it's 4. You still KO in orange, you still cover 100 dodges with your setups. The biggest thing is Endlight and Sidelight are less safe to toss out. Make no mistake, the 5-frame nerf to both of these is pretty big, but everything else is not as bad as it looks. What they described in the paragraph about consistent frame advantage on hit, that seems to be pretty accurate. This is all about consistency. They want to make it so when you land a Greatsword attack, your opponent's dodge timing is consistent, even if it hits at a weird part of the move. Hopefully that makes more sense than just staring at those words. I may have confused things even more when talking about late combos, early combos. Hammer, this is a lot more simple. The Hammer Neutralite, Sidelight, Neutral Air, and Side Air have all received increases for their reward on hit. This leans into the Hammer's identity of powerful hits and brings it closer in line with the reward curve of other weapons. So Neutralite is going to deal 1 more damage. Sidelight is going to deal 2 more damage. Neutral Air is going to deal 2 more damage. And Side Air, guess what, is also going to deal 2 more damage. This is the fastest breakdown in this video. It's probably going to be the fastest in this entire review. Overall, you can clearly see this is a buff to Hammer. I'd even say this is a significant buff. If it was just a damage increase to 1 move, then whatever. It's just a standard. We've seen this before. We've seen it many times before. They're just tweaking it a tiny bit. This is 4 attacks. So everything is gonna KO earlier on Hammer now, just because these moves are key critical to its kit, and we'll see how this comes into play. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these get changed in the future. Katars, actually a similar change, just in the opposite direction. So the Neutralite, the Sidelight, the Downlight, and the Side Air have all received decreases to their damage. This leans into the Katars' identity of using many quick but small hits, and brings it closer in line with the reward curve of other weapons. attacks. So neutral light deals 2 less damage, side light deals 3 less damage, down light deals 3 less damage, and side air deals 2 less damage. I mentioned before with hammer that changing 4 of these moves is pretty significant. I would say Katars, it's a little bit more complicated, because on the one hand, these Katar attacks are a lot easier to land than the hammer ones, so you would think that these nerfs affect it less. But on the other hand, Katars needs more hits. You're going to be landing these more, so you're going to experience the nerf more. You could, I suppose, think about it in terms of percentages, like what percent was Katars nerfed versus hammer buffed in terms of how many hits it takes to take a stock. I think that's overcomplicating things a little bit. I'd just say that this seems like a pretty significant nerf to Katars. Rocket Lance. We have shifted some power from the Rocket Lance's aerial kit into the ground kit in the form of greater force for the neutral light. The Rocket Lance neutral air now has less allowed acceleration and speed during the attack to provide clearer opportunities to punish this expansive attack. The Rocket Lance down air now has less threat coverage near the user to provide wider avenues to contest or maneuver around this attack. We have increased the time to hit of the Rocket Lance exhausted recovery and decreased its force as it was both too quick and too powerful for its overall utility. Let's go one by one. So Rocket Lance neutral light has increased force from 40 fixed, 43 variable to 42 fixed, 45 variable. So it's always gonna send a little bit further, and at high HP, it's going to KO earlier. I don't know if I like this. Lance Endlight is not the most interactive move. I think it's also already one of the, if not the strongest move in its kit. Buffing this feels a little bit odd, but we'll see how it comes into play. Especially because Rocket Lance neutral air has decreased maximum speed and allowed acceleration during the attack and on miss. So this means when you miss the nair, the amount of fade out that you're allowed has been brought down, and the initial burst of speed is also brought down. We don't know how much when it comes to these movement changes, but this has been a requested change for a very long time. Rocket Lance down air, decreased threat coverage near the user during the aerial version of the attack. So this means the Lance down air now has a slightly smaller hitbox, very close to the user. It's trying to make the identity more of a disjoint, more of a long range weapon, so when you're right next to the Lance, it doesn't feel unfair that you get hit. And the Lance exhausted recovery increased the time to hit from 10 to 12 and decreased the force from 58 fixed 54 variable to 53 fixed 50 variable. Remember that number of 4 variable force being significant? Well, here it is again. So this is the attack when you've already used Lance recovery at least once and you press it again. It's that very quick burst that had a crazy amount of force. That crazy force is being brought down. It's also going to take 2 frames longer to come out. So overall, this is a nerf to Lance. The Endlight did get buffed in terms of KO power, but the neutral air should be a little bit more punishable. The Lance recovery has less KO power for the weird second version, and the down air hitbox change, it might not do anything. It might change some combos, it might change some edge guards. We don't really know yet. That'll take a lot of games of testing to find out. Closing out the weapons, we've got changes to sword. And I know a lot of people probably expected scythe changes, maybe some orb, some bow changes, some spear changes, but seeing that the last balance patch changed almost every single weapon, including a nerf to scythe, I think they're trying to give those a little bit more time to breathe. So what did they do to sword? Well, Brawlhalla says the sword kit provides flexible coverage that allows for a high degree of stage control. So we've increased the risk associated with a number of key attacks to grant larger openings against this weapon. The neutral light, side light, down light, and down air now have greater recover time on miss. We have also slightly increased the time to hit of the down light to better match its reward and utility. The side air and down air also allow less acceleration on miss to provide greater opportunities to counter these versatile attacks. So sword neutral light increased total recover time on miss from 4 fixed 15 variable to 8 fixed 15 variable. So this means when you use sword neutral light, you are stuck for 4 frames longer. This makes it significantly more punishable. Sword side light increased total recover time on miss from 5 fixed 21 variable to 9 fixed 21 variable. Exact same change here. Significantly more punishable. Sword downlight increased time to hit from 8 to 9, increased recover time on miss from 5 fixed 20 variable to 10 fixed 22 variable. This is a big nerf. So not only does it take 1 frame longer to come out, which means certain strings, certain combos may have a bigger opening to escape, but it has 5 guaranteed frames of more lag, and even more if you're on lower decks. Absolutely massive changes to Sword here, but there's still a couple more. Side air, decreased amount of allowed acceleration during the attack and on miss. This means you're less free to just evade after whiffing the attack, and it also means that while you're using it, you can't move backward as easily. You can't switch directions as easily. Sword down air, decreased amount of allowed acceleration during the attack and on miss, and increased total recover time on miss from 5 fixed 24 variable to 7 fixed 24 variable. So similar change to the side air, you're not as free to just move around and toss this move out, and it also has 2 more frames of lag when you miss it. Overall, big nerfs to Sword. Greatsword and Sword got hit this patch, and that's also not a surprise. It's what the competitive scene has been asking for a very long time. People are gonna look at Greatsword this patch and say that it got hit hard. Sword, by far, got hit the hardest. 4 more frames of lag on end light, 4 more frames of lag on side light, 5 more frames of lag on down light. That is a big nerf to its ground game. And what a way to wrap up these weapons. Of course, we've got the legend changes, which are gonna be smaller, but let me just briefly interject here. This is the largest balance patch I have seen in years. I've played this game since 2015. This is one of the bigger patches in general. This is certainly 100% going to shake up the meta. That's no question. We're just gonna have to see how. That's a very complicated thing because if Sword gets nerfed, does that make Axe better? Does that make Scythe perform better? When one thing gets nerfed, it's not that that thing is just worse. It's everything that interacts with it, the matchups, the legends, those change too. So it's almost impossible to predict what's going to happen. I think blasters are absolutely gonna see an uptick in use. Jaehyun is probably gonna see a little bit of a downtick. Things like bow, things like orb, I think are gonna see more play, especially as Sword is nerfed. Orb can cover similar angles, similar options, so maybe people that played Sword are gonna switch their legend, whatever weapon that Sword character has, they're gonna swap to one that has orb. And in general, I think we may see a lot of people looking for new mains, playing new weapons. We might see battle boots get pushed more. Maybe that meta is expanded on as people are shifting away from their current legends. Overall, I'm a fan of almost every single change here. I mentioned a couple that were a little bit strange, and everything regarding acceleration, we just don't have the numbers on that. I really wish they gave some kind of percentage, but that's for the future, I suppose. This seems like a great patch, and we're not done yet, because some legends also got significant changes. There's that word significant. So Azoth is up first, and they say themselves, we have significantly increased the force of Azoth's neutral bow and side bow signatures to better match their long total duration and overall risk. Azoth bow Enzig increased the force from 65 fixed 56 variable to 65 fixed 60 variable. That's an increase of 4. That is a significant buff. This is going to KO earlier. Azoth bow side sig increased force from a range of 76 55 fixed 54 48 variable to a range of 76 55 fixed 58-52 variable and increase the damage from 23 to 25. So this move has a range because depending on when you hit it, it's going to have more or less force. Those skeletons that come out of the ground are active for a long time, and if you hit later in the move, it's not going to KO as early as the initial blow. But no matter when you hit it, it's going to have 4 more variable force than before. So it's going to KO significantly earlier than before, and it's also dealing more damage, which means it's actually going to KO even earlier. These are big buffs. Ember is up next. This is pretty big. Ember's neutral bow, neutral Katars, and side Katars now have significantly increased force to better match her general glass cannon design and to better fit the overall risk of her Katar signatures. It's funny that they mentioned the overall risk of her Katar signatures because Ember bow Ensig is one of the best signatures in all of Brawlhalla already, and now it got significantly buffed. Increased force from 65 fixed 51 variable to 65 fixed 55 variable. There's that 4 increase, there's that 4. And this one, this is questionable. This is, I think, the most questionable change in the entire patch. Ember Bow and Sig. This move did not need to be buffed. I really don't think it did. I guess Ember is not seeing a lot of play, so they were like, okay, well, let's make her stronger. I'm all for buffing her Katar Sigs. This seems crazy to me. I'm scared. Ember neutral Katars. This is, it's funny, this is one of the worst Sigs in all of Brawlhalla. Increase force from 75 fixed 54 variable to 75 fixed 60 variable. This is not an increase of 4. This is an increase of 6. And you know what? This move needed it. This move was actually one of the worst in all of Brawlhalla. People say like Dusk Spear down Sig. Comparatively though, this move was worse. It like never hit where you wanted to hit. It never KO'd. It was just not worth it to throw out. Now Ember's Katars are gonna be a lot more scary in the red, as if they weren't already, but now she can cover this angle very quickly from the ground. And to close it out, Ember's side Katars increase force from 65 fixed 51 variable to 65 fixed 54 variable. So it's not quite that 4-point increase, but it still is pretty big. Ember buffs overall are huge. I know I'm repeating myself, but the Bow Ensig one is terrifying. I'm not quite sure why this was changed, but the Katar Ensig, I'm 100% behind. Lord Vraxx. Vraxx players are eating pretty good. We have increased the reward on hit for Lord Vraxx's side Rocket Lance, down Rocket Lance, neutral blasters, and down blasters to bring these closer in line with other similar options on higher performing legends. So what this is suggesting is that Lord Vraxx is not performing like they'd expect him to, and so they're bringing some of his moves in line with those other legends. Vraxx Lance Side Sig increase the force from 65 fixed 50 variable to 65 fixed 53 variable. It's going to KO earlier. Lance Down Sig increase the damage from 22 to 25. So this is also going to KO a little bit earlier with the damage increase, but it's mostly damage. And I think this is to compensate for its longer than expected startup for someone of Vraxx's archetype. He is a very fast attacker, and this move takes a while to come out. So it's going to deal a little bit more damage to make up for that. Blasters Ensig increase the force from 60 fixed 55 variable to 60 fixed 57 variable. So a slight increase to the force. This is going to KO earlier. And Blasters Downsig increase the force from 70 fixed 46 variable to 70 fixed 51 variable. This is a 5-point increase to Vraxx's best signature. Okay, a little bit crazy. This move already is a snipe. It has a ton of utility because of it being a snipe. This is a huge change to Vraxx, actually a massive buff, because this is the sig you're probably going to not just be using, but landing the most. We'll see how this plays out. Lord Vraxx is not a very popular character right now, and this might change things. Like I said, Vraxx players eating good. Magyar. Magyar's down Greatsword, side hammer, and down hammer all now have much greater reward on hit to better match their relatively high accuracy requirements and significant risk. So his down Greatsword is going to deal 3 more points of damage, increase damage from 23 to 26, increase force from 55 fixed 52 variable to 55 fixed 56 variable. There is that 4-point increase. It's going to deal more damage, and it's going to KO earlier. Hammer Side Sig increase damage from 22 to 28, and increase force from 61 fixed 52 variable to 65 fixed 56 variable. So not only does it deal 6 more damage, that's a lot, but it's going to KO significantly earlier. It's actually even more than significantly earlier because the fixed force was also increased. It's not just an increase of 4 to variable, it's an increase of 4 to fixed as well. And finally, his hammer down sig increased force of the aerial version from 60 fixed 46 variable to 60 fixed 49 variable, and the ground version from 65 56 to 65 58. So this one is also going to KO earlier. The biggest buff is to the Magyar hammer side sig. This one's going to feel like you got hit from a suit of armor, from a tanky suit of armor. Overall, pretty significant buffs for Magyar. Up next is Nyx. Nyx's side blasters and down blasters now provide greater reward on hit to better match their overall risk and lengthy total commitment. So Blaster's side sig increase force from 65-55 to 65-57. It's gonna KO earlier. Blaster's down sig increase damage from 23 to 27, increase force from 60-57 to 60-60. So dealing a lot more damage, KOing noticeably earlier. Overall, Nyx got some nice buffs. Priya. Okay, Priya's neutral Chakram now has significantly greater recover time on miss to provide a wider opportunity to close the gap and punish reckless use of this attack. Priya's side Chakram now has greater recover time and less force. To equalize the risk and reward of this signature, we have slightly increased the recover time for Priya's down Chakram to grant a wider opportunity to counter this attack. Priya's neutral sword now has less threat coverage at the edges of the attack and significantly greater recover time on miss to provide a clearer window to close the gap and punish this attack where it recovers. These changes fall in line almost one-to-one with what I was saying in my initial Priya videos. So first up, the Chakram Ensig. Increased total recover time on miss from 22 to 28. 6 more frames of lag when you miss. This is a big deal. I was talking all about sword with how these few moves got nerfed by 4 frames of lag. This is 6. And the Chakram Side Sig increased total recover time from 23 to 26. Decrease force from 5550 to 5548. So 3 more frames of lag and KOing slightly later. Chakram Downsig. Increased total recover time from 19 to 21. 2 more frames of lag whether you land it or whether you miss it. And this is the big one. Priya Sword Ensig. Decrease threat coverage at the extreme edges during the final hit. So this means when you leap up into the air and then do the second hit, that second hit is going to have a smaller hitbox on the very edge, and increase total recovery time from 16 to 24. How this was released with a total recover time of 16, seeing that hitbox, this is a conversation for another day. This might be a conversation for 3 videos. I've had that conversation for 3 videos. 16 to 24, this is an increase of 8. So this is double the amount of added lag that Sword was getting to some of its grounded attacks, like I just said. Big nerf to this move, and it absolutely needed it. I mean, we all know it needed it. So we'll see how these changes affect Priya. The last note that they have here is because of these changes, Priya is now legal to use in official esports tournaments. This is the standard whenever there's a balance patch and there's a new legend. They are then legal to use in the official Brawlhalla tournaments. There's one exception in memory, which was Petra. There was a balance patch, she just wasn't changed. And so they said, okay, she's legal because there still was one. We still made one, she just wasn't changed. That's another story for another day. It turned out pretty funny. But yes, if you are a Chakra main, a Priya main, you can now use her in these tournaments. So I'm excited to see how this shakes up the meta. Ragnir. Ragnir's side Katars and down axe now have greater force to bring them closer in line with other similar options on higher performing legends. So same thing with Vraxx. Ragnir is presumably performing lower than expectation, so they're buffing Katar side sig by increasing the force from 60-51 to 60-53. It's gonna KO earlier. Axe down sig has increased from 75-54 to 75-58, so a significant increase in the force. It's gonna KO significantly earlier, and I think this move needed it. It was one of the worst in the game. Overall, some nice quality of life buffs to Ragnir. Sir Roland. This is an interesting one. I'm actually confused. Sir Roland's neutral rocket lance has received a significant increase in force to better match its lengthy total commitment and overall risk. So Lance Ensig has increased force from 71-55 to 71-59. Again, 4-point increase, that's significant, but that's not why I'm confused. I'm confused because in the previous balance patch, Sir Roland also got buffed. And what almost everyone talked about for good reason is the Lance side sig buff to make that thing go crazy. It just zooms across the map. But in that patch, Lance Ensig also got a force buff. It used to be 71-53 and it got buffed to 71-55, and now it got buffed from 71-55 to 71-59. Maybe they felt like that buff wasn't enough, maybe it didn't KO early enough, but this is pretty crazy for the Roland players because again, if an increase of 4 is significant, then in the past 2 patches, he has 1.5x stat. It got buffed from 53 to 59 in quarter 1 of 2025. That's a pretty big deal. Although Roland's weapons got nerfed this patch, his signature kit, you guys are doing good. You're doing fine. Roland overall buffed. And I should say, when I'm saying overall for these legends, I'm not talking about their weapons. I'm saying overall changes that they wrote down for these characters. Although Ulgrim, it's easy to say overall he got nerfed because his neutral axe, side axe, down axe, neutral lance, and side lance have been overperforming in team game modes. So we have significantly reduced the reward on hit to be closer in line with the majority of other legends. This makes a lot of sense. Ulgrim is everywhere. So Ulgrim axe Enzig decreased damage from 28 to 24. 4 less damage. Axe Side Sig, decreased force from 6256 to 6251. Decreased damage from 26 to 23. So the Ulgrim Axe Side Sig KO'd insanely early, and now it's gonna KO later. Not only because it does less damage, but it has 5 less variable force. Ulgrim Axe Down Sig, decreased force from 7454 to 6550. Okay, big nerf on this one. Now the numbers for fixed don't have the same logic as the numbers for variable. For you can't apply the same logic, but basically this is a significant nerf. This move is gonna KO a lot later, and I think that makes sense because it comes out so fast. Ulgrim Lance Enzig, decreased force from 5856 to 5854. So again, significantly nerfed. It's gonna KO noticeably later. Ulgrim Lance Side Sig, decreased force from 7055 to 7050. Decreased damage from 26 to 22. This one, same as the others. Either it's dealing less damage or it's having less force. This one is both. Ulgrim overall nerfed, not just in these list of signatures, but also Lance as a weapon. So this may shake things up in the 2v2 meta. May is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. I don't think it will, but it's still nice to see. And closing out our legends, we have Wu Shang. Wu Shang has also overperformed in team game modes, so we've reduced the reward on hit for his neutral gauntlets, side gauntlets, neutral spear, and side spear to better match their high degree of utility and coverage. Wu Shang nerfs have been requested for a long time, so let's see what they did. Gauntlets Ensig, decreased damage from 27 to 24. It's going to deal 3 less damage. Gauntlets Side Sig, decreased force from 6049 to 6045. I'm beating a dead horse, but that's 4 less. Significant nerf to the force. Spear Ensig, decreased damage from 26 to 22. Decreased force from 6048 to 6045. This one's pretty big. 22 damage for a signature. It's not a lot. It's not a lot, but it makes sense because Spear Ensig is basically a light attack and it KO'd like a signature, and this move has been nerfed like 20 times since Wu Shang was released, and it's still insanely good. So I don't think Wu Shang players need to really worry. Spear Side Sig, decreased damage from 25 to 23, decreased force from 6049 to 5546. This one also, this is going to KO a lot later. It's a bigger nerf than to the snap. And overall, Wu Shang has seen some pretty sizable, I would even say significant nerfs this patch. So big balance patch, the last thing we need to figure out is if it actually achieved what they tried to do. Is this a good patch or is this a bad patch? Brawlhalla themselves said this balance pass improves follow-up attacks and reward on hit for a few underperforming weapons, while increasing risk in opening dodge windows for several overperforming weapons. We have also increased the reward for a number of underused signature attacks and decreased the reward for several of the most used signature attacks in recent tournaments. This patch also marks the first adjustments for Priya and the new Chakram weapon, making them legal for use in official tournaments. So yes, they did patch Priya and they did change Chakram, so okay. Improving follow-up attacks and reward on hit for underperforming weapons. Yes, I think they did that, and I think they probably did that effectively. Again, it's going to take some months to figure out, but that seems pretty good. Increasing risk in opening dodge windows for overperforming weapons. Opening dodge windows, I don't know how accurate that is. I think it's more making the dodge windows consistent, but increasing risk, that is absolutely true. And they've done it here in bigger fashion than maybe all of 2024's patches. Increase the reward for underused signature attacks. I would agree with almost everything. Ember Bow Ensig is crazy to say underused. If you've played against Ember players, if you've played against good Ember players, yeah, Azoth, both sides sig, same thing. But overall, I think I am a fan of these signature changes. I think these are good. Particularly when they say decrease the reward for several of the most used sigs. That also makes sense, especially these 2v2 directed nerfs. They didn't change every legend, they didn't change every broken sig, they didn't buff every bad sig, but I don't think that's what this patch was trying to do anyway. This is 100% a meta shifting patch, and if you try to change everything while doing that, it might make the game a complete mess. So I think this is a very, very good patch. I'm extremely excited to see how this changes the competitive meta, if it changes the competitive meta, and I'm excited to test out all the neat little new things you can do with Blaster's sidelight, Sir Roland Enzig, Lord Vraxx Downsig, and of course, Toe Defense Orange Barrel. That's it from me. See you in the next one.